with a few few examples that I wanted to talk about, and just finish off the set of examples that where I intended to demonstrate in class. And there is one really tricky problem that I would like to talk about. Um, and after that, we will start, a very important uh, property of linear transformation. Linear transformations do not have this property, which is invertible. I mean, under what circumstances you know that a linear transformation is invertible, and what happens when you have an invertible linear transformation? What are the consequences? Okay, all right. So before that, I just want to make a small announcement. I mean, unlike the first homework, do not post your homework into the homework folder, because the problem is there is no way to make that folder private. And if you post your homework, your solution is actually visible to others. Okay, so I mean, I don't want to do that. So what you can do instead is that, I mean, you can create your own Google Drive and post all your homework, and then share the link with me and the TA. Okay. So in particular, Pavan Enuganti is the TA who is taking care of this homework assignment. So you can share the homework folder, your homework folder, individualized homework folder with me and the TA. Okay. All right. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay, hello. Okay. So if you recall, last time we actually started a problem, but we never finished it, right? So let's just continue with that. And we were talking about vector space of polynomials. Okay, all right. So this was the general vector space of polynomials defined over 0, 1, which means your input values are restricted between 0 and 1. Okay. So these are just set of all real polynomials of degree less than or equal to n. So all real polynomials, all real polynomials all real polynomials of degree less than or equal to n. Okay. An example of such is that if I have something like this, then this would contain all real polynomials of degree less than or equal to 2. Okay. And the standard basis vector, a very standard basis vector of such a standard basis of such a vector space is easily constructed as 1x and x squared. And these are clearly linearly independent of each other, because you cannot express one in terms of the other. And since you have 3 such basis vectors or basis functions, the dimension of P2 is nothing but 3, which is 2 plus 1. So in general, for Pn, where f could be real or complex, the dimension is n plus 1. Okay? All right. Now, what I want to do is that I want to define a linear transformation from this. I mean, so let's say if I have a linear transformation, it just maps everything to a real number, so just a scalar, right? And this is linear. Okay? So this is linear. And this is defined by, I mean, whatever basis you have in your vector space, right, in the space Pn01, this is defined in the following manner. So these guys, your P of x, these are just 1, x, x square, I mean, depending on whatever basis you are defining. Okay, all right. Now, what I have here is really is a P2 01. Okay, all right. And this is how the transformation is defined. Okay, all right. So what I need to do is I need to find first, I need to find the matrix of T with respect to the standard basis. Okay, so I need to find the matrix of T with respect to the standard basis, which is nothing but 1x and x square. This is what I need to find. Okay, all right. Now you know, I mean, since this 1x and x square, where do these guys belong? Now these guys belong to the set vector space P201, right? And so when you apply a linear transformation, it just outputs a scalar, and where does it output it? It outputs to a set of real numbers. Okay, so that means I need to know what is T of 1, T of x, and T of x square, just like anything else, right? I mean, just like you map the basis vectors anyway, right? But your T is defined in the following fashion. So, I mean, if I want to find T of 1, I'll just use the definition of the linear transformation, right? So this is just 1 ds, right? And similarly, T of x is the integral, and T of x square is the integral. Now, this is very simple. This is just 1, right? And this is 1/2, correct? And this is 1/3. So these are the numbers that your linear transformation with respect to the standard basis on the vector space P201 maps on. Okay, so what I have here is, now you want to know the matrix, right? So this is what I need to know. So I want to know the matrix with respect to this standard basis, 1, x, and x square. Okay, so what I do is I have here 1, x, x square, right? And I have T1, T of x, and T of x. Okay, all right. Now, what I need to do is that I need to express each one of these outputs in terms of the standard basis, and that should be easy enough. I mean, just if you think about it, T1 is just 1, and you know that, I mean, your basis vectors have to be expressed in terms of, I mean, whatever output you have to be expressed in terms of your basis vector. So what can we do here? What we do here is just keep 1 plus 0 times x plus 0 times x square, so that you express T of 1 in terms of the basis vectors 1x and x square. The next is T of x, right? Now T of x, we computed that to be 1/2, right? So this is 1/2 plus 0 times x plus 0 times x square. And then T of x square, we computed that as 1/3, and so this is 1/3 plus 0 times x plus 0 times x. So you are able to express this in terms of the standard basis vector. What this tells us is pretty straightforward. I have 1 here, 1/2 here, and 1/3 here. That's it. And these rows are just identically equal. Okay, so you got your matrix of the linear transformation. Okay, now the next question is, I know the dimension of P2, right? I know the dimension of P2, which is 3.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, how are we writing the vectors of the, like when we do T of something, it maps to the range of the linear transformation. So how can we represent a range of linear transformation in terms of basis of the domain?
So what is the matrix of the linear transformation? You have three elements here, right? I mean, you have three elements in your vector space P2 of 0 and 1, right? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you express your linear transformation? So you apply your linear transformation on each one of these elements. Okay. So
Yeah.
assuming that this is your standard basis and you got the output. So what I'm expressing, what is your matrix of the linear transformation? Your matrix of the linear transformation is the relationship between your output and your input, and that is the fundamental that we have been discussing all along,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is it. Yeah. Okay. So this is the matrix. Now, it easily, I mean, you can, if you look at this matrix, it's really easy to see that the rank of this matrix M of P is nothing but one, because you have a one linearly independent row, right? And so this is the range of T. And so what is the nullity then? So the nullity of T is has to be the dimension of the vector space minus the dimension of the range, right? So this is T. Okay, all right, okay. And if you want to know a basis for the null of T, that's also easy because you now have the matrix, right? So if we want to know the basis for null of T, this is nothing but we have the coefficient matrix. You have a set a column vector multiply, so you can choose a vector x, y, z transpose. And if you operate this matrix with this column vector, set it equal to 0, that is how the definition of null space is, you get this x plus 1/2 y plus 1/3 z equal to 0. Right? Now you have three variables here. You must have two free variables, right? So what I can do is I can rewrite this as x equal to minus 1/2 y minus 1/3 z. So your basis representation, which is xyz, I can now replace this as minus 1/2 y minus 1/3 z, y, and z. And so this can be easily written as y times minus 1/2 comma 1 comma 0 plus z times minus 1/3 0 comma 1. Clearly, these two vectors are basis vectors, right? Because they span the null space, and of course, they are linearly independent because you see the ones and the zeros are shifted. Okay, so this is just an example on the vector space of linear transformation. Okay, all right. I mean, vector space of polynomials. So instead of just having vectors, you can also have, you know, polynomials, and therefore, instead of just having vectors as standard basis, you can have polynomial functions also as standard basis. Okay, these has, I mean, connotations when we actually deal with functional spaces in higher dimensions. All right. So let me save this. Okay. All right. Now, as I said, we need to probably there is another couple of other examples, and then I'll get back to other eigenvalue examples later. Okay. So let's say I have this. This is a very straightforward, simple example. Let's say that I have. I have a set of vectors, okay, that spans the vector space V. All right. And what I also know that I have a linear transformation from V to W, and that linear transformation is surjective. Only one. Okay. Then can I say that P gamma 1, P gamma 2, P gamma n span set. So what we can do is, I mean, we can take some vector in, W, right, and some vector in V, right? So you can take some vectors. So you take some vectors data in W, right, such that your P, that is for some vector V in the vector space V, you have this relation. Okay, and this works because this has to hold, because the reason being the T is a surjective mapping, right? So T is onto, so this has to hold, correct? Okay, now there is this alpha which is in V. Okay, now what I can do is, now since gamma 1 through gamma n is a spanning list of V and alpha is a vector in that same vector space, I should be able to write alpha as a linear combination of this spanning list. So in other words, I mean, I can simply write this as, A1 gamma 1 plus A2 gamma 2 plus AN gamma n, and that's it. Now, straightforward, we also know that T is a linear transformation. So that means I can do this, right? Well, what you now see is that you have this vector beta, which is in W, and that is represented as a combination of T gamma 1, T gamma 2, all the way up to T gamma n. So naturally, your T gamma 1, T gamma 2, T gamma n will span the vector space. Okay? All right. All right. Just one more example from, I think, whether this is the most suitable one, or maybe this is interesting. Okay, let me pick this up. Because I see the other example I solved in class some time back. Okay, now suppose n is a positive integer. Okay, you're familiar with this notation, right? And what you have here is a linear transformation from Fn to Fn, which means your vector space is of dimension n, it could be real or complex, right? Okay. And we define this linear transformation in the following manner. E x1 xn is nothing but so interesting. What you see on the right hand side is that every component, okay, that is getting outputted to the target space, every component of that vector is identical. X1 plus X2 plus X3 plus dot all the way up to Xn. Every component. Okay. All right. Now, I mean, what I need to find out is the eigenvalues and eigenvectors of this transformation. Okay. So that's besides the point. I mean, what I need to find out is eigenvalues and eigenvectors of T. That's I mean, fine. It's not so much as a computational exercise, and rather it's something that is interesting to observe, right? Do you see anything? Do you, from this, the way this linear transformation is defined, do you observe anything? Is there something interesting that you see?
Sir?
Yeah.
If all the elements are the same, then it would like
It would.
like it would be an eigenvector.
Meaning, what are you getting at? What would be an eigenvector?
Like if you had 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, like n times,
right?
Then you'd have n into 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Right. So your eigenvectors are actually scalar multiple of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Good. That is fine. What else do you see? So that's the reason I said that this is not much of a computational exercise. Rather, it's like, what else do you see? See, guys, remember one thing, no matter whatever, we are proving a bunch of theorems, bunch of results, seeing applications in methods. One of the most important things of doing linear algebra this way is to be able to see that if your transformation is linear, and if you are mapping between finite dimensional vector spaces, then what is the effect of that linear transformation on your basis vectors? Because the other day you have seen, I have given some examples of change of basis, right? You know that PCA, SVD, and many other transformations are just change of basis vectors, right? And change of basis does amazing things. It helps us do a lot of things very, very easily and conveniently, right? So one of the things to observe always whenever a linear transformation is defined to you is that what effect does it have on the basis vectors? So can you think of something in terms of basis vectors? If I choose the standard basis on the set of Rn, right? If I choose the standard basis, which is 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, what do you get? So with respect to the standard basis, so with respect to the standard basis, which is E1, E2, En, what do you see this linear transformation does?
It all maps to 1, 1, 1, 1.
Right. Excellent. Right. So it means no matter what you do, like if it's a CE1, it is just 1, 1, 1. CE2 is also the same. Okay. 1, 1, 1. So how do you interpret this? So with respect to the standard basis, what this operator is doing is that it is outputting a matrix, right, which consists of all ones. Okay, all right? Because when you apply T on E1, when you are getting this 1, 1, 1, 1, what is this? This is just a column vector, right, of the matrix of the linear transformation, right? So what you are getting, your eventual matrix is just a sort of a matrix with all columns as 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or all rows as 1, 1, 1. Interesting, right? Okay, so it's like a low rank matrix, because if it's an n by n matrix, all the n minus n rows are linearly dependent on each other. So you can zero those out and you will just have one row, right? Fine. However, we know what the eigenvectors are. What are the eigenvalues, right? It's very, there's a nice, interesting way to compute the eigenvalues without actually getting to the determinant. As you know, I try to avoid determinants, computation of determinants as much as possible, right? So what we know is that P of x1 through xn, according to the eigenvector equation, is nothing but this, right? Okay, all right, and that is nothing but whatever your linear transformation is given, right? x1 plus x2 plus xn. Okay. So what it means is all these guys, lambda x1 is equal to x1 plus x2 plus xn. Lambda xn is also x1 plus x2 plus xn. Okay, so you have a set of equations. Now what I need to know is to find the values of lambda from here, okay, without actually doing a lot of complicated algebra. I don't want to do that. So the simplest possible way to deal with this is that you have any equation, just add those up, add it, okay? So if you add all of these guys, on the left-hand side, what you are going to get is lambda times x1 plus x2, right? And on the right-hand side, you are just adding this n times, so we'll get n times x1 plus x. Okay, the thing about eigenvectors is that, I mean, we are interested, I mean, not all eigenvectors are trivial eigenvectors, right? So the sum x1 plus x2 plus xn will not be 0. And so therefore you can cancel on both sides, right? Okay, so you can cancel on both sides. So therefore your eigenvalues turn out to be, okay, interesting, right? Okay, all right. And n could be any scalar, and n could be equal to 1, it could be greater than 1 or whatever. Okay, all right. Okay, good. And so what I would, I think I will just skip this particular example, and I'll just give you 2 examples to work on. I mean, this is not homework. I mean, just for fun. Okay, so I'll just write it here. I mean, you don't have to submit. No need to submit. Just this is just for your practice. Okay. No submission. Don't submit this. So one is T is a linear transformation from R2 to R2 defined by okay. So find the eigenvalues and eigenvectors. And guys, please do not, I mean, just don't construct the determinant. I mean, don't, I mean, without constructing the matrix and the determinant, you can find the eigenvalues. Okay, all right. Okay, so just follow the simple eigenvalue eigenvector formulation, which is you write T of WZ is equal to lambda times WZ, and just solve the simultaneous equation, which is damn easy to solve, right? I mean, it does not actually, should not give you any computational headache. So that's number 1. And number 2 is, yeah, if, so T is a linear transformation from B to B, right? And I assume that T inverse exists. Okay, all right. And lambda is a scalar. So if lambda is an eigenvalue of T, if lambda is an eigenvalue of T, then show that 1 over lambda is an eigenvalue of 1 over T. Okay. By the way, here T inverse, by T inverse I mean 1 over T. Okay. I mean, it just, I mean, I shouldn't have used this, but I mean, let's just, you know, indulge me for a moment. So by T inverse I mean 1 over T, but generally that's not the case. I mean, T inverse and 1 over T are not the same. Okay. All right. Okay. So just try this out just for fun. There is no need to submit. Okay. All right. I mean, and if you face any difficulty, you can talk to me. All right. So before I start, so I mean, as I said, let's you know, now start talking about invertible linear map. But before I talk about invertible linear map, I want to talk about something else that you are familiar with. Okay. So recall that we talked about orthogonal linear transformation, right? And we have discussed some properties of orthogonal linear transformation, as in if your matrix of the linear transformation is real and symmetric, then the corresponding eigenvalues are real and distinct, and the corresponding eigenvectors are orthogonal, right? And that gives us a change of basis matrix, really, and that also helps us express the original matrix as some sort of a transformation, right? And what happens is, the way you express that transformation, you actually cook up an inverse of another matrix, and that matrix actually contains the columns, and those columns are actually orthogonal to each other, right? We also discussed a property which says if a set of basis vectors, if a set of vectors is orthogonal, then they are linearly independent as well, right? Okay. So if the columns of a matrix are linearly independent, we know that it's a full rank matrix, and then therefore invertible, right? I mean, we know that a priori. Okay. So just keep that thought in mind. Okay. All right. So there is one way to say whether your linear transformation is invertible or not before we actually delve into the deeper theory of invertible linear map, is to be able to show that if you show that the matrix is the transformation is either an orthogonal transformation or a scalar multiple of an orthogonal transformation, then you can easily conclude that the transformation is also invertible, because orthogonal transformations are invertible. Okay. Also recall that orthogonal transformations preserve length, and they also preserve angles. Okay. All right. We have shown these properties. Okay. Also recall some of the basic properties of the inner product, which means inner products are symmetric, right? So this is one. Recall that orthogonal right? And then there are some standard properties of inner products, which is inner products are symmetric, right? Right? Okay. And right? So these are the properties. These are the things that we have already discussed. Okay. All right. Now, the problem that I want to talk about is this. Now, I have a linear transformation that goes from vector space V to itself, right? Okay. And V is finite dimensional. Okay. All right. And this is a vector space over real numbers. Okay. And there is an inner product defined. Okay. There's an inner product defined on V. Okay. All right. And there are, for two vectors U and V in V, I have this particular property that the inner product is 0 whenever okay. All right. And there is also this standard property that if you have a non-zero vector in V, then apply the linear transformation on that, it will take you to a non-zero vector. So if for a non-zero vector in V, if we apply the linear transformation, okay, it will also be. So these are given to us. Okay. All right. The question is, T is invertible. That's the question. Now, I mean, please note that we do not have the luxury of using some of the properties of invertible linear map because we haven't discussed those yet, right? And so the only possible way to show that this is a linear, I mean, invertible linear transformation is to show that this is either an orthogonal transformation or it is a scalar of an orthogonal transformation. Because orthogonal transformations, what they do is that the columns of T, if T is an orthogonal transformation, then the columns of T form an orthogonal basis, and therefore T becomes invertible, we know, right? So how do we? So I think the sketch or the idea is this. The sketch is that I'll probably showing T is orthogonal is a little bit of too much of an ambition. So what I'll try to do, I will try to show that T is the scalar multiple of an orthogonal transform. Okay, all right. So in other words, I mean, you know that orthogonal transformations with the inner product, they actually preserve length, right? Okay. So in other words, I mean, what I want to show, this is equivalent to showing that 1 over k, where k is a scalar, is an orthogonal transformation, right? Okay, all right. Okay, now this 1 over kt is, so in other words, this is equivalent to showing that because we know that orthogonal transformations preserve the inner products, right? Okay. Okay, and this is one of the properties of orthogonality. I mean, if a transformation is orthogonal, we know that the inner product of TUN, which is sorry, TCTV.
Sir, could you repeat the point 1 of recall again?
Point 1 of recall. So what I wrote as point 1?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So what I said was, in orthogonal linear transformation, preserves length and angle, and orthogonal linear transformations are invertible because you know that a set of orthogonal vectors is linearly independent. So if the matrix of your linear transformation consists of orthogonal vectors, so that means the columns of that matrix are linearly independent of each other. And if the columns of a matrix are linearly independent, you have a full rank matrix, right? And therefore it is the determinant, if you want to go the determinant way, the determinant of that matrix will be non-zero. Okay?
Right. Yeah, just one more thing. When did we define what is an orthogonal linear transform and what is meant by an invertible transform? I think I've missed it.
In the SVD lecture, singular value decomposition lecture.
Okay. I will look that up. Thank you.
In that SVD lecture, I have also proved the properties of orthogonal transformation as they preserve length and angle. Okay, and also that an orthogonal linear transformation satisfies the property that TUTV, inner product of TUTV, is equal to the inner product of UN. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So all done in the SVD, singular value decomposition lecture. Okay. So all right. So back to this. So in order to show that T is a scalar multiple of an orthogonal transformation, I mean, I have to, be able to show that this holds, right? Okay. So in other words, I mean, I can further simplify this because K is a scalar, right? So I can pull these out and nothing has changes. So in other words, I mean, if I show that this works, so if you pull K's out, 1 over K's out, it becomes 1 over K square. and then you can pull this to the other side, right? And this is what you get. I mean, so this is what I mean. This has to make sense, right? I mean, can we? So in other words, once again, there is an equivalent statement which says that I can see that this PUTV equal to K square. And K, I said, is a constant, I mean, scalar, right? So this is like a, okay. So is there a way I can show that this ratio of PU, TV, and UV is a constant? Okay. If I'm able to show that, I have effectively shown that T is the scalar multiple of an orthogonal linear transformation, and therefore T is invertible. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is what I need to show. Okay. All right. I hope I can manage this. So how do we, this is still sort of tricky because let's see how we plan to achieve this. This involves, so actually this is sort of equivalent to showing, that, I mean, PUTU, inner product of PUTU over the inner product of UU is constant. Okay, all right, and that is where we should begin. Okay, so so we show to begin to we show that okay, all right. Now here is the trick. So let me indulge me for a while. Okay. This is I hope I have written it clearly enough for everyone to see, right? Okay, because I don't want to jump into figuring out what this is, but this is V minus a scalar, right? V minus a scalar, which is inner product of UV over the inner product of U and U. So you realize that this is a scalar, right? Because inner products are always scalars, right? So what you have written here is that you have written V minus some scalar times U, comma, U. So you are taking the inner product of V minus some scalar times U and U. That is what you are doing. Okay? All right. Now, if you really open this up, what are you going to get? Right? By the properties of inner product, you write this is VU minus then this time, this guy over here, inner product with U. Right? Okay? And what is that going to be? This is nothing but we have this UV inner product UU, right? Wrap it up and then sorry, ignore this, right? Just save it. The simple inner product algebra, right? However, if I do it this way, right? I mean, if I define the scalar this way, then what you observe something interesting. You have inner product of UU in the numerator, you have inner product of UU in the denominator, and now we have V inner product U minus V U inner product V. Now you know from properties of inner product, that G inner product Q and U inner product of D are the same. So this is nothing but C. Okay, all right, good. What I also want to do is that please go back to the statement of the problem, which says that if I have the inner product of two vectors defined to be 0, and then you apply a linear transformation on them, then that inner product, that's a new inner product, which contains the linear transformation, also turns out to be 0. This is given to us, right? Okay. So we are now going to use it. So how do we use it? So this is one vector, this big guy on the first component of this inner product is just one vector, and the other one is the second vector. So what we have shown is that the inner product of these two is equal to 0. So what I want to do is to compute the transformed inner product, which is I just apply the linear transformation on this, right? Just by this, using this particular fact. So what happens is, what I will just do is we just apply T here on the whole of it, right? And we know that by virtue of the linear property of the linear transformation, T of 0 is 0, right? So now if I apply this T, what I get is that EV minus, and this is just a scalar, U V U P U comma P U, and that is also 0. Okay. Now what I can do is very simple. I can expand by using the properties of inner product, and that is easy to see that if I do that, if PV PU minus this this guy within the parenthesis, which is okay, all right, and that is nothing but okay, all right. So what I can do now is that you can see easily that I can rewrite this in the following manner, that PV PU inner product by divided by the guy, right? Sorry guys, ignore the denominator. Okay, so what I can do is I can write correct, simple algebra, right? Okay, so what we have seen is, so I just let me write this here again so that you are not confused. So what we have seen is this, that we have PVTU by UV, and that is nothing but this guy, right? That is nothing but PUQ by Q. Now just think of it in a straightforward manner. I mean, look at the left hand side, look at the right hand side. Okay, so you see some structure on the left, you see some structure on the right. Now what we can easily do is that we can exchange V and U, right? We can easily do that. We can exchange, if you exchange V and U, what do you see? You will see that I can rewrite this as inner product of TU TV over VU but that will have no effect on the right hand side, correct? Because your right hand side only consists of u. Okay, all right. So what that implies is, let me erase some part of it. So what that implies is, oh no, I should not erase. Let me save this because this will be, I'll rewrite it in the next whiteboard. Okay. So I hope I recall what I now wrote. So what I wrote is this, right? I wrote that PV PU over UV is PU over U. Okay, all right. Now I just exchange U and V. If I do that, I'll just get PU PV over VU, but the right hand side will not change. Get that? Okay. So if I do that, I mean, so if I do that, what I'll get is that we'll get TU, right? TU over UU, right? And oh, right. No, I made a mistake, guys. I'm really sorry. I apologize. You should have pointed out because I exchanged U and V, right? So when I exchange U and V, that means you replace U with V wherever U is. So this will be TV, this will be TV, this will be V, and this will be V. Extremely sorry, right? Okay. So what I have here is that, but if you really look at the left hand side is the same, right? I mean, because the inner product of TVTU is nothing but the inner product of TUTV. And the inner product of U and V is nothing but the inner product of V and U, right? This follows straight away from the properties of inner product. So what that implies is that since these guys are equal to these guys, correct? TU, and so these two right hand sides will also be same. Okay, all right, okay. And so therefore, what I can essentially emphasize is the following, that, and so if these two are same, I just sort of, you assume that this is equal to some constant, right? So this TU over UU is just a constant, right? And therefore, and we just take that constant equal to k square, non-zero, right? Okay, all right, okay. And that's it. We wanted this. We wanted to show that, right? We wanted to show that this ratio is constant, because if you go back to the previous whiteboard, okay, we wanted to show that this is constant. Okay, all right. And so if this is constant, I can go back to any one of these equalities earlier, and I can hook up this TUTV if by UV equal to k squared. In other words, TUTV equal to k squared UV, In other words, 1 by k Tu 1 by k Tv is equal to P, right? So this is a property of an orthogonal linear transformation, right? So that means that 1 over kt is an orthogonal transformation, and therefore T is inverted. An orthogonal transformation, and therefore 1 over kt is just so 1 over kt is invertible, right? And since k is a scalar, this implies that T is also invertible. I wanted to give this as an assignment, but then I thought that this will be too hard as an assignment problem, so I decided that you solve. So these are some of the tricks, some of the classic tricks. I would not say these are standard tricks. It actually took me a while to solve this, right? But this is one of the things, one of the ways. The reason why I solved this problem is that I wanted to show you that this is one of the ways to show that a linear transformation is invertible. Okay, is to map it to an orthogonal transformation. If you are able to show that it's orthogonal, it's invertible, right? Okay, and that also follows straight away from the fact that, let's say, I mean, we know that if a transformation is invertible, right, this follows this property, right, that the transformation and its inverse has to be the identity transformation. We also know that if a matrix is orthogonal, right, then there is this property, it is T and it's orthogonal, and the transformation it is orthogonal, it also follows this property, right? So in other words, for an orthogonal linear transformation, the inverse is nothing but this guy. Okay, and that kind of helps us figure out or helps us understand why an orthogonal transformation is invertible if you do not want to think about a full rank matrix and columns being linearly independent and others. Okay. All right. So this actually forms the basis of our next discussion, next class. What we are going to talk about in the next class is this. The next class we will discuss invertible linear maps. Invertible linear and their implications in practical application. Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
Like in that previous slide, you had written this one thing about if V not equal to 0, then TV not equal to 0.
Right.
Are we using that here at all?
No, we haven't used it. It just gives us, because I mean, otherwise, I mean, there could always be an argument that if I have a non-zero vector and I apply the linear transformation on the non-zero vector, it could map to 0, right? So implicitly we are using it because when I set that constant as non-zero, right? I'm setting this constant as non-zero, right? So you could otherwise argue that unless you specify, give me that condition that a non-zero vector, and you apply that linear transformation on that non-zero vector, it guarantees that it maps to a non-zero scalar as well. Okay. So in that way we are using that because we are setting that constant equal to non-zero. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, all right, guys. So at least, I mean, what I expect for next class is that, let me open up this. Okay, there is in chapter 3 of Sheldon Axler, at the very end, your textbook, there is a discussion on invertible linear maps. Okay, on chapter 3 of Sheldon Axler. I can tell you the page numbers. I think I have the book open. Yeah. So, can you see the book? So you can see this invertibility, right? So I would expect that you guys at least read this particular section and come prepared to class. Okay? All right. See you next time.